Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nugentino Cinema. And today I'm here with my friend Kay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for being
Good.
here.
Yeah, of
We
course.
met on Discord like recently, somewhat recently. You were like through the Film Junk Discord, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was great to meet you, and now we're mutual followers on Letterboxd as well, so we're official film buds.
Yeah, for sure. And today we're going to review Stroszek, which is one of my favorite films. Had you ever heard of this?
So I'd heard of it before. I'm a big Herzog fan, but in my slog through the Zog, I hadn't got to this in his catalog yet. So this was my first time watching it. Yeah.
Mhm. So what did you think?
I mean, I loved it. I thought it was great. Again, I'm a little bit biased because Herzog's one of my favorites. So I kind of went into it knowing that there was a high likelihood that I would like it. So maybe that gave it a little bit of a bump for me. But
Mhm.
yeah, I thought it was terrific as always.
Yeah, I've loved this film for a long time. I saw it like way back in 2009. I through Film Junk. Like it was one of the movies that Jay talked about that like really kind of opened my mind cinematically to like what was out there. And yeah, I've loved it for a long time. Uh, I just like the incorporation of non-actors and the sort of like loose story and like the weird kind of like road trip nature and him coming to America and Bruno S's performance. Like I just love all that stuff. So
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, this is number two on your top 100, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
Yeah, so you really love this movie. Wow. How many times have you seen it?
I'd have to go to Letterboxd and look to see how many times I've logged it. I'd guess
Mm,
like at least 5 times I've logged it on Letterboxd,
okay.
maybe. And
Wow.
then I probably saw it a handful of times before that, before Letterboxd, maybe 3 or 4 times. So I don't know,
You're a
maybe like eight or
Stroszek
nine times.
expert.
Yeah, it's a movie I
Wow.
watch a lot. I used to have like the
Okay.
old. There was like a Werner Herzog like box set on
Mm,
DVD. I still should probably buy. There's like a Blu-ray box set that I never got. Like this is like big collection, but that one had really good Werner Herzog commentary on it. And actually today, I went and looked, and that commentary was on YouTube. So it was really cool to hear that again. But yeah, that's one of the better commentaries I've heard is Werner Herzog talking about making Stroszek. So that was
man,
really
I could
cool.
listen to him talk about anything, but I'll definitely need to look that up. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to do much reading on the film or listen to the commentary. I actually just watched the film this morning before work, and now we're here. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
fresh. My thoughts are fresh, feelings are fresh. But I'm very curious, as somebody who's seen it almost 10 times, you said,
Mm.
where our perspectives will overlap or differ. But I'm actually curious. You said that this helped open you up to other kinds of film. What do you mean by that?
Well, just like sort of like just how real it felt, and like I mean, I
Mm,
think a lot of it is the incorporation of the non-actors. Like even if like the first time I had watched it, maybe I didn't fully understand that stuff, but like it definitely felt like more real than anything I had seen before, and just sort
mm,
of the strange like absurdity of it all. Like it's like a lot of my favorite films, even if they're dark and depressing, like a lot of them share like a sort of sense of humor that I think
hmm
is like my kind of sense of humor. Like there's like an absurdity to a lot of my favorite films, and this definitely has that. I mean, with like the dancing chicken and like all that stuff, it really comes in more towards the end. But
hmm
yeah. So that I'd never really seen a movie like that was this sort of like loose and like it just like something about it felt really special. And to be honest, if I really think about it, this is probably the first foreign film I'd ever watched.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was like 15 at the time. Like
hmm
I don't know for sure, but like I think so because I can't think of anything earlier than that. But
I
yeah,
mean, what a great place to start.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
And
awesome.
it's interesting because it's a combination of like you have the first chapter or the first half is in
Mm,
Germany and that's all in German, but then you come to America and there's this interaction between the characters and like Americans, and it's interesting how that works out because like the scenes with the banker, like all these people are real. Like the banker is a banker that they found, and like this auto shop
okay.
guy that they're living with is a real guy that worked in an auto shop, and that auto shop is his auto shop, and like all the scenes in the truck stop are real truckers, and it's pretty much all real locations. And really, the only actress in it, I think, is Eva, who is his
Mm,
girlfriend in the movie, and she was in like some Rainer Werner Fassbinder films. But aside from her, I think pretty much everyone is just sort of a found person, and they're all really good.
Yeah, I had no idea. I would not have guessed that, because they all just fit so perfectly. He has
Yeah.
such a good eye for, I don't know, just like personalities, I think. Like he just picks people that have such distinct visual and yeah, visual characteristics and like they're kind of characters themselves. So yeah, it fits really well. It creates a feeling of like it feels very organic when you're watching it,
Mhm.
and very lived in. So yeah, I agree. I didn't know that though. That's crazy.
Yeah, and there's a big story behind Bruno S, which is really interesting. The main character, it originates, and Herzog talks a lot about this in the commentary. Um, with him, he discovered Bruno S by watching him like I think it was a student film that was airing on TV and about street people, street performers. If you watch
Mm.
like in the scene where he's playing his accordion on the street, that's kind of like what his life was at the time. He's kind of like a busker or whatever you may call it. So he watched this documentary and he felt like he had to find this person because he was making at the time The Enigma of Caspar Hauser, and so Bruno S starred in that, and then he promised Bruno S that he would be in Wojciech, which was his next film, but then he ended up deciding to use Klaus Kinski instead, and Bruno S was very upset because he'd already like booked all of his vacation time, and he was just like, "What am I gonna do? Because I can't get this time back, and it's like unpaid time."
Mm-hmm.
And so Herzog felt really bad, and he like very quickly like wrote this movie. I think only in a couple days to
Oh
make with
wow.
Bruno S. And he calls it like Herzog has a very distinct way of like phrasing things, but he was like, "It's my monument to Bruno S." And it's very much a film about him. And so Bruno S, like he was raised, he had a very troubled like childhood, and he was in and out of like psychiatric hospitals when he was a kid, and he went through a lot of like troubles. But in the beginning of the movie, when he's coming out of like a hospital, all this stuff is sort of, or not a hospital but a prison in that case, all this stuff is sort of inspired by his real life, and they sort of take that and mix it with the story of them going to America and Herzog's kind of like outlook on America and outlook on just life in general. But yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I thought the choice of placing it in Wisconsin was really
Mhm.
interesting too. Like it's kind of American heartland, but it's also a little bit forgotten. Like all the spaces are very run down and dusty and half abandoned and yeah, so he really kind of it's 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 a really good like visual metaphor for what they're going through. But yeah, I just thought it was like such a smart choice to place it there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, yeah, kind of interesting. I wonder if there was a specific reason for Wisconsin over another state, but yeah.
Well, there was some interesting stuff to Herzog talked about that with the commentary. One is that in Germany things are very closed off for like he was talking about how for thousands of years like Europe has been settled and like it's very like set in its ways. And also he was talking about where he grew up in Germany. It feels very closed off. Like it's like a
Mm,
cul-de-sac where he lives and everything is like surrounded by mountains. So you kind of feel like enclosed in there. But he was
mm,
talking about like in America, especially in the Midwest, which is where they are for most of the movie.
mhm,
Everything's very open and sort of nomadic. And that's why you had the
mhm,
theme of the mobile home and all this stuff,
mhm.
is to like sort of fit in with that nomadic feeling, and it's just this like wide open space that is America. And but interestingly, he originally took he first thought of the Wisconsin stuff when he was working with Errol Morris, because Errol Morris was developing the documentary on Ed Gein at the time, like the serial killer, and
Okay.
um, and Herzog and Errol Morris were friends,
Mm.
and there's like a story that Errol Morris like invited Herzog out to like help dig up Ed Gein's mother or something for the movie.
Oh, whoa. Whoa.
And I don't know if that
Close
actually
friends.
happened. Yeah, I don't know if that actually happened. There's some crazy stories with Herzog that like some of them aren't even true, but
Mm,
but all I know is that he, from whatever experience he was having with Errol Morris, he learned about this Wisconsin town and he
mhm.
decided to use it in his film. But Errol Morris was very upset because he felt like he was taking the location away from him.
Ah,
Yeah, and
mm,
I think Errol Morris is actually credited. You see his name for a brief second in the credits, and I can't tell
Hmm.
because the credits are in German, but like I can't tell exactly what it says, but I think it's just basically some sort of thanks to him. But
Interesting.
yeah, but so he used that location from Errol Morris, and the town is called Plainsview, but he renamed it like Railroad Flats because he thought like Plainsview was Errol Morris's thing. So,
Hmm.
but Ed Gain or not Ed Gain, Errol Morris never made the Ed Gain documentary, so he never actually ended up using that like location. But yeah, there's an interesting background to that.
Oh my gosh, well, I hope they didn't dig up his mom for nothing.
Yeah,
But yeah, wild. I guess, well, there's my answer. Thank you. Yeah, curious though. It fits so well and with the railroad tracks, and I like how they tie that in too. And
mhm.
there's a scene where he's like, and here's the railroad, and here's some more railroad. It's very
Yeah,
kind of there's like a transitory element to all of the film. I think you kind of touched on it being a bit of a road movie.
mhm.
And there definitely is that, like they're constantly kind of having to shift from place to place, and it seems like whenever they're like static in an environment is like when the troubles set in. I mean, not that
Yeah,
it's not troubled throughout, but uh, yeah, he like has his meltdown about not
mhm.
being allowed in the bedroom and stuff like that. And it just seems that the problems kind of fold in on themselves more when there's not momentum in what they're doing.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say something really nice on Letterboxd that makes a lot of sense. But he was saying that I forget exactly who said this, but that he loves road movies where people are just driving and they're trying to drive away from their problems, even though they're always
Mm-hmm.
behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the classic like grass is green on the other side, like
Mm-hmm.
all these things are terrible in Germany, but then they think they can go to America and everything will be better, but really it's not. Like
Yeah.
your problems are always going to be with you, and it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
help. But I think like one of the things I love most about this movie is how Herzog compares the difference between America and Germany. And Bruno S like monologues about it. He's like basically saying in Germany they just beat me, and but like here they like beat me with a fine print of like these papers, and like everything's very passive aggressive, and he almost prefers the cruelty, like just the straight up cruelty, rather than the
Mm-hmm.
sort of like passive aggressive stuff that's going on in America.
Yeah, I love there was even like the visual element where he has like the little wooden figurine that's all contorted, and he's like, this is my emotional state, like this is what you're doing to
Yeah,
me, this is my soul. And it's that whole thing of like it's almost worse when it's like invisible because it's harder to convey what you're going through. So
hmm
yeah, I liked that bit a lot too. That was a great monologue.
yeah, yeah, and all
Yeah.
that's a lot of stuff comes from like his own experiences. I think in that he talked
Mm.
about when he was a kid, he had to hold up a sheet that like he had urinated on, and they made him like
Oh
hold up the
yeah.
sheet all day
Hmm.
long until it dried, and that's a real story that really happened.
Oh my God, I didn't
Mhm.
know that.
Yeah,
Ooh.
just a lot of it is just real, or at least taken from real things that happened, and a lot of the
Wow.
dialogue, like with the pimps at the beginning when they were kind of like beating on him and harassing everybody. They
Mhm.
were kind of like rough characters. I don't think they were pimps, but they were rough characters. And Herzog basically was saying like, just insult them as you would really insult them. Like, so it's all kind of improvised. So there's a structure to what they're doing, but a lot of the dialogue is just made up on the spot.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Wow, I had no idea that this was such kind of oh, what's the word? Is ad hoc, right? Like it's just kind of like thrown together. I didn't know that. God, it just goes to show his skill. Like all of these pieces, he's like, all right, write the movie in 2 days. We'll scrap it together and make a banger.
Yeah, for sure. And that's interesting about Herzog is like this is a fictional film, but it is so much blurs the line between fiction and documentary.
Mm,
It's playing with so many things that are real, but the fiction element of it is just the structure and the story. But he's also just capturing interesting moments, like the moment where Bruno gets beat up by the pimps and he goes to this doctor for just advice, and then you
mhm,
have that moment with the baby where he's like holding up the baby with his finger, and
mm,
it's this weird moment where you see this baby can like grip. These premature babies have this like insane grip strength,
mhm,
but that's a real thing Werner Herzog was just fascinated with, and he included it in the movie. Not really with any real reason at the time, but like it. But I think it does like end up working very well with the movie. And he
mhm,
explained it as like really, it's just like trying to get at an empathy that they're trying to get through with the movie, like trying to have real feeling for Bruno and what he's gone through, and this doctor having feeling for all these babies and whatnot. But I think that's a really great scene, and yeah, just really interesting stuff that's really happening. And he's also a documentarian, and like an actual documentarian. He's tons of documentaries, and it's interesting because that stuff sometimes blurs the lines, but in different ways. And so it's, I don't know. He has a really fascinating career. He's one of my favorite directors for sure.
Yeah, well, handshake to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I liked the baby stuff a lot too. I feel like it very oh, what am I trying to say? It made me feel for how much he had been cast aside. Like he's this full adult man who has skills and empathy and a desire to be more, and the doctor's like, look at this premature baby, it could grow up to be chancellor. Like at almost every single step, like it's kind of, nobody really believes in him, nobody really like takes time to try to understand. And you see that a lot when he goes to the United States with the language barrier, where like nobody's
Mhm.
really trying to communicate, like especially with the banker. He's like, okay,
Yeah.
great, like thanks, bye. The baby kind of encapsulates that feeling too, where it's just like, you're dust now, dude. Like
Yeah,
he's
for
from
sure.
the future, nobody cares. Yeah, he's just like constantly abandoned in various
Mhm.
ways, on large and small scales. So
Yeah. And
it's
since
kind of bleak. It's actually very bleak.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's a very like dark, almost sort of nihilistic outlook on things, but I don't know that it's truly like, because it ends with him like he ends up shooting himself. But I think like it's more, nothing in the movie is sort of like literal. It's just like I feel like it's trying to get at sort of just a feeling of being like outcast in society and not
Hmm.
feeling like you really fit in anywhere. and uh
Yeah.
and like I thought it was interesting, like I'd heard this from somebody else, so this isn't like an original thought, but there's like all these loops happening at the end. Like there's the truck he gets out of, and the truck like catches on fire, and that's going around in circles.
Hmm.
And then he gets on the like chairlift,
Hmm.
and it's going around in circles, and he's just kind of going
Hmm.
back and forth on it. And then you have the dancing chickens that he activates, and uh, and those are just going. This chicken's just dancing around in a circle, just endlessly dancing. And I think basically what it represents is like in life we're expected to do these things. Like we're expected to go and work and have a job and just sort of like fit into this structure that just goes around and around in a circle. And Bruno S like can't do that. He's just not like cut out for it. And whether it be Germany, he doesn't really work well there, and he doesn't work well in America, so he kind of just feels lost. And it hits at a feeling that I think a lot of people have, and especially like in Middle America, there's all these people that kind of fall through the cracks. But yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I was kind of saying earlier, the choice of doing it in the Midwest, in this small town, that it feels abandoned. It feels like there's no hope, there's no prospects,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's such a startling adjustment after their hope of like, oh, in America, everybody makes money. Like it'll only take us a little bit of time, and then we'll have the dream too. And they just so deeply fall for that promise. And so it just makes it so much more, like I said, bleak, jarring, kind of startling when you're like, oh wow, there's really nothing here. Like the grass is maybe even a little bit more dead on this side of the fence, definitely not greener,
Yeah,
unless it's painted green. But yeah, it's definitely like this interesting take on the American dream from this perspective of just like sort of hopelessness, but there's a comedy to that too. It's like
yeah.
a dark comedy.
That's what I like. I
I
think
lost
that's
my
what.
train of thought there, but
Oh, no, no problem. But like that's what one of the things I love most about the movie is how it blends this sort of these very dark ideas with comedy. And
mm,
I mean everything once Eva leaves Bruno, and after that he just loses it, and his house is taken away, and basically his response is just to throw a bunch of beer into a car and just drive off with the
hmm,
old man Clemens that they came with. and they do a
And his
very
turkey.
yeah, it's a very
I'm sorry.
absurd scene where they like just like they rob a barber, and then they just immediately use that money to go and buy like a turkey and like just like random food. And then the old man just gets arrested, and Bruno like manages to sneak out the back and just drives off with this turkey, pretty much, I guess, from Wisconsin to North Carolina. I don't know if they actually say it's North Carolina, but like I looked it up, and that area that he's in is in North Carolina. So I kind of assume, because it shows him driving for a while, that he just goes on a road trip, just like driving, as far as he can drive, and then eventually ends up in this strange place where they have, it's like a tourist trap kind of place in North Carolina, where they have these odd like chairlifts, and a lot of it is very Indian themes, like Native American, and I don't know if that's some sort of commentary, like maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but like
I
like
don't think
how
so.
this like this town, or these like, it's sort of exploiting like the natives, and that's actually in when he's working with the auto guy has a Native American helper as well, and so that could be a theme that's there. But
Yeah, no, I think you hit on to something there. There's like layers of disillusionment. So it's like the further he kind of gets into the American landscape, like mentally, emotionally, and literally, the more that he's seeing like the layers peel back. And so it's like, even in the way that we treat our heritage, it's just commercialized and made into a tourist trap. And like, there's really nothing that feels like genuine for him to cling on to or gain significance from. Like, everything is just kind of like cheap, fake, ready to be taken away. So no, I think you definitely touched on something there.
oh yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the part I didn't think about much, but I think about that more often recently.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, there's so many like little great moments that are just like Herzog including things that he's fascinated with. Like one of the interesting things is the scene where Bruno's stuff is like being auctioned off, and you have that
yeah.
auctioneer who's like speaking like a million miles a minute, and like that guy was a real, Werner Herzog made a documentary about those guys, and he was like, this is the last form of poetry, like about this like this like fast talking stuff. But
Mm,
yeah, that guy, whenever he's doing that, he's amazing. But then it's funny, he has like a moment where he has to actually kind of like give some dialogue, and like the old man comes up and he's like, this is a conspiracy and like all this stuff, and then the guy's just like, I cannot understand you, and just like very like stiff acting.
mm,
But I like and I also noticed he like, there's one moment where he like stops doing the auctioneer stuff. He sort of just like looks around and like looks like dead in the camera, then looks away. So it's like very awkward, like, but it works. I
oh,
mean, maybe it doesn't work exactly, but it just like, there's a charm to it that I think is interesting. But
I mean, maybe it's just because it was my first watch, but I actually didn't notice that at all. So
okay,
it could be that it's a little bit more in my face on the next viewing, but because there will definitely be more viewings. But I actually didn't, yeah, catch on to that in that scene.
yeah, I don't know if I'd noticed him looking at the camera before, but I'd noticed like his
Mm,
stiff acting. But like, there's also that with like the truck stop guy,
mm-hmm,
when he's like telling Eva to come out to his like truck, like he has a very weird sort of way of delivering things, but I think
mm-hmm,
he's good in his own way. But he's
yeah.
obviously real, like just like a real guy. And
Mine is the truck that says slippery when wet.
yeah, and then the guy
So
at the
funny.
end, there's like a cop who's like we got to get somebody out here, we got to get an electrician, like the chicken won't stop dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And like which is
Yeah.
like delivered very strangely, but it's also a very strange line that Herzog puts in this guy's mouth, but it's a funny moment. But
It was
yeah,
the closing line too, I think.
yeah, with chicken
Yeah.
won't stop dancing, I could look at that as like, we're just trapped in this loop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I think the movie, a lot of it is like looking at like what even is, and maybe these seem like heady pretentious themes, but like what even is life, like just in general. I think that's what
Mm,
like why are we set in these specific ways, and like what even, why are we here? And I think like
mm-hmm.
when you include the stuff like the baby and all that, I think that's definitely hitting at a lot of that stuff. So
Yeah, it definitely, obviously, with the looping at the end, kind of alludes to this like cyclical nature of life. Like, once you
mhm.
kind of fall into these traps or routines, it's very difficult to get out of them again. And then you see that on a larger scale in what happens with Eva. Like she starts off in Germany doing sex work in order to make ends meet. She's the reason they're even able to go overseas at all, is because she's able to raise the money for them. And then once she gets there, she's not really able to make ends meet as a waitress, and so she starts to perform sex work again in order to again make ends meet. And she's constantly like supporting him because he doesn't really have the motivation or ability in whatever sense to make money to support himself and their home together that they eventually lose. But yeah, and so you see her also going through, in kind of the background a little bit, the same cycles, and so everybody's just kind of stuck in these same loops. And eventually it ends with her going, like, she realizes that she can't get any further in the United States, but then she basically just says, I'm gonna go to Canada, and is doing the same things. Like, she ships off with these two guys and is like, I'm gonna get a better life this way. But when you think about it, she did that exact same thing before. She shipped off with two guys to the United States, didn't work out, ships off with two guys to Canada. And so it's like every character that you meet is kind of stuck in this loop, whether they like it or not, whether they realize it or not. And so yeah, I think like the literal looping at the end is kind of a really good way to summarize that and create like a visual means of representing it. But yeah, her story is really interesting to me in this as well.
Yeah, I thought she was really good, and like yeah, she's the one person who's an actor in the movie, and I think she had a little bit more like dramatic weight to bring to it, so I think that makes sense. But yeah, but I thought she was great, and that story is good. But yeah, I just think it all comes back to people, whether their habits are good or bad. I think the loop, like, it's like people just always fall back on whatever they're used to or whatever they've been doing for the longest time. Like, you know, you could get stuck in your job, like, you know, somebody that lives out in the suburbs, they could just get stuck in a cycle of just boredom and just doing the same thing over and over again. Or somebody who's out in the streets, like, selling drugs, can just always fall back on that and just be stuck in this like cycle of poverty. But like, yeah, I think a lot of people out there, I'm not saying change is impossible, but a lot of people do get stuck in these cycles. And yeah, I think this film is definitely exploring that.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, just the depressive atmosphere is a huge part of that too. But the very beginning of it is starting with the beginning of this cycle. Like, he gets out of jail and they're like, you have to promise you're not going to drink again. And of course, comedically, the first thing he does is go get a beer, and then, you know, falls back into the same cycle with these people, getting into arguments and conflicts, and then goes back to busking on the street. And so, yeah, it's just this very kind of, it's a little bit cynical, but the comedy makes it feel more humanistic, I suppose. Like, these things are very real that people struggle with, but, you know, there's always a way to kind of be cheeky about it, I suppose. And I think that that's kind of the way to start breaking out of the cycle, is to be able to look at it objectively, maybe even laugh at it, and then you can start to break it. But unfortunately, we don't see anybody doing that in this.
Yeah, nothing really works out good for anybody, but
nope.
Yeah, but it's I love the film. Yeah. What would you rate it out of 5 stars?
Gosh, well, my I actually hadn't thought about it, which is kind of funny because obviously I think about that all the time with how addicted I am to Letterboxd. You know, I feel like I would be very comfortable with like a 4.5, but I could definitely see that bumping up to a 5, just because there are a lot of details that I did miss that you've told me about now. And so I feel like going into the screening again, or into a viewing again, may enrich it a little bit more. I mean, it's hard for me to dislike Herzog, especially when something's put together as well as this. But yeah, I think those little details that you mentioned, as much as I think that they would enrich, they also a little bit subtracted. Like the ending scene, like you said, where he's like, you know, got a chicken, can't make it stop dancing. Like, that moment, I could feel him trying to hold back a laugh. So there were those little things where it's like, maybe it's not a perfect movie, but it's pretty darn close. And over time, like, that might become more endearing and give it a different perspective. So yeah, first viewing, 4.5 out of 5 with a heart. But I could definitely see it going up.
Okay. Yeah. To me, any sort of flaws like end up making it just more endearing to me. Like anything with like the guy
Yeah.
cracking up or stuff like that. But yeah, to
Yeah,
me,
now
it's
that
like
I
an easy 5.
understand why that happened, I think I would like it more, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard for me to
Mhm.
separate myself. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like to just watch this for the first time and not know too much about it. So definitely seems like a cool experience.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
aside from the couple line synopsis on Letterboxd, that's all I really had in terms of knowing what to expect. So I didn't go in blind, but I went in mostly blind.
Nice. So how did you
Yeah.
come to originally get into Herzog?
So I have been very fortunate to have a peer group of cinephiles for a number of years since I worked at an independent theater when I was younger. And one of the people there was slogging through the Zog. He was, that's where I got the term. He had that collection of Herzog films and was basically like, I'm going to watch every Herzog film I can get my hands on. And so that was kind of my introduction where I was like, oh, like, who is this director that's so good you want to watch all of their films? And then I saw Grizzly Man and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Just so good. It just, the way that he's so he doesn't shy away from the realism and the grit and the bleakness and the harder parts of humanity, but he also makes sure to leave space for like humor and joy and love and happiness, and so he just has this like great balance of perspective on humanity, and I think that's what's kept me in love with Herzog. But yeah, originally, basically, a friend of mine was doing what I'm trying to do now, and introduced me that way. So yeah, over the past year, I've been trying to watch all of Herzog's films, but it's a bit of slow going because I keep getting distracted. But I'm making progress.
Okay, nice.
That's a long answer to a short question, but there you go.
What are some of your favorite ones that you've seen so far?
Yeah, so I think I'm a little bit more of like a doc nerd, so I tend
Mhm.
to like those. I tend to favor those a little bit more personally, even though maybe his like scripted features would be more objectively good. Like I know everybody loves uh Aguirre, Wrath of God, and
Mhm.
of course Fitzcarraldo, and so he has like those certified classics. But my favorites tend to be more the documentaries. Like I said, Grizzly Man was my first exposure to Herzog, so that one is very sentimental to me,
Mhm.
and might be one that I would choose as being my favorite. But I don't know. It's kind of a difficult question to answer, I suppose,
Yeah.
because it changes so much, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so yeah, I would maybe go with oh yeah, because like and is it Edge of the World, End of the World? One of those as
Encounters at
well.
the End of the World.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Almost there. I got most of the way there. I think I would pin that as my favorite doc of his, and then not Fitzcarraldo. Nosferatu is in my top 4 on Letterboxd, so I'll go
Nice.
with those two as my two favorites. I'll pick a doc and a feature or a near a scripted. Wow,
Nice.
scrambled
Yeah.
eggs.
Yeah, those are good picks for sure. Encounters at the End of the World has one of my like favorite moments specifically when the penguin is just like walking off into the void.
Into the abyss. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment, and he's like, we could bring him back, but he would just start walking again, and I was like, oh my God. Yeah, and then it has like the thing with the guy with his fingers, and yeah, there's so many good like just details. Like he just cuts past all of the superficial stuff and somehow manages to like get to the soul of a person and then just celebrate that in
Yeah.
whatever state it's in.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Like my favorite one for sure is Stroszek, but I love a lot of his films.
Mm,
Grizzly Man's definitely one of my favorites. It's definitely up there.
mhm.
Um, Lessons of Darkness is really good. That's like a
Yeah.
shorter one. That's like 50 something minutes.
Mm.
One that's not talked about too often is Even Dwarfs Started Small. I love that. Um, what else? Oh, My Best Fiend, the documentary about his relationship with Klaus Kinski. is
Yes,
amazing.
I just watched that maybe last month, and wow, it gave me a whole new perspective because I didn't know about their relationship in that way
Mhm.
before. And now I kind of want to go back and rewatch some of the stuff that he's done with Kinski because what a firecracker to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Fitzcarraldo is probably my favorite Kinski one.
Mm,
Um, Aguirre I like too, but those are sort of lower down. It's not like I do like them a lot, but I think a lot
mm-hmm,
of those movies people would put at the very top, but they're not
mm-hmm,
necessarily the very top for me. But I do like them a lot, and I like Nosferatu a
mm-hmm.
lot as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that one. It just is so like visually rich, and I like just that it's his take on it and that he does it, as himself. And it's my favorite. It's probably my favorite like vampire movie.
Hmm.
And so that gives it a bit of a bump as well. But it's just
Nice.
so beautiful, like the colors, the reds, the acting, the atmosphere. I could go on. It's in my top four for a reason.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, he has such a rich filmography. There's so many films. Like I've seen a lot
True.
of them, but there's still a bunch I need to see. You know, like even still,
Mm,
like
mm-hmm.
Wojciech, I haven't seen Cobra Verde. Um, I'm trying to think. His first movie, Lessons or Signs of Darkness, or Signs of Life, I think it was. I haven't seen. A lot of them at this point are like smaller films, but I haven't
Mm.
seen a lot of his newer documentaries that came out in the last like few years.
Mm.
But yeah, I think he's got like 45 films or something. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling me I'm trying to watch all of it because I'm like, okay, well, if I'm gonna say that he's my favorite director, I need to see everything.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen the majority, but then he just keeps making films. I've felt a little less like engaged with some of his newer stuff, maybe.
Hmm.
Like Family Romance LLC. I was like, this is like an interesting concept, and I like that he did it kind of like guerrilla style in Tokyo, but stuff like that, it feels like he's making time to just like play a little bit more, take it easy, and uh
Hmm.
and so his films maybe don't like hit as much, but I always appreciate them.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, his older stuff when he was a little bit younger and maybe had maybe felt like he had more to prove was yeah, I like that era.
Yeah. I forgot to mention Rescue Dawn. That's like a newer, like 2006. He made that with Christian Bale. That's probably like his most Hollywood film.
I don't think I've
That
seen that one yet.
Yeah, that one's really good. And Bad Lieutenant with Nicolas Cage is really good.
Mm,
Um, what else? My son, what have you done? That's probably not like it's sort of like I probably give like a 3.5, but I think it's pretty interesting. It has Michael Shannon and Willem Dafoe. So I think
3.5 is still strong.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Bad Lieutenant was probably the last fictional film of his that I really liked. Although I did
Mm,
think Family Romance LLC was sort of refreshing in like its guerrilla nature. It was good to see him get
mhm.
back to that, but I
Yeah.
wasn't crazy about like some of his newer documentaries. Like one was like Lo and Behold, The Reveries of the Connected World. That was like about the internet, and there
That
was some
one
in
was
there that
so
yeah,
dry.
hmm
It was a
yeah,
little tough. I remember just being like, it was like peeling my eyelids open, like, oh my God, pay attention. It kind of felt drony. I need to revisit it though. It may have just been my mood, but I understand what you mean. And then like
hmm
Fireball about the comments, I was like, okay,
yeah.
nice.
I still haven't seen Into the Inferno, which I've heard is good, but I haven't watched it yet. That was about
Yeah, it is good.
volcanoes. And he
Yeah, I
just did
like that
another
one.
one. But yeah.
He loves volcanoes, and I love that.
He also did a fictional film Salt and Fire with Michael Shannon, which is about
Oh, I don't think I've
volcanoes.
seen that.
Yeah, but I didn't hear it was very good, so I never watched it. But yeah.
Mm. Volcanoes and operas, definitely two signature Herzog things. He always manages to incorporate some like guitar music or opera into his films, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Stroszek had some interesting musical choices, and I didn't
Yeah.
like quite pick up on what exactly some of them were, but listening to the commentary, like when they're bringing in the trailer, like they have this like very tinny sounding music, and it was actually music. It was like a Thomas Edison recording, like from like the early days of sound recording,
Oh
and
wow.
it was some song that was being sung in like 1890 or something.
Huh. Did he
But
say why he chose that? What why such a specific track?
I think it was like some sort of juxtaposition between like the modern society and then like also
Mm.
like like sort of like the song kind of feeling small and like antiquated in this like big
Mm,
giant like house, something like that.
mm,
But I mean, it gives it like a very off kilter vibe that I think is interesting.
mhm.
And there's really good. I forget. I think one of the musicians he mentioned was Chet Atkins. They're traveling through the country, and there's like this nice like sort of jazzy music playing. And yeah, yeah, a lot of the music was really good, and the harmonica thing at the end of the chickens dancing is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And that chicken sure know how to move.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, there's so much stuff in his catalog that you could just spend hours unpacking. If I could choose to speak to any person, I would love to have a conversation with Herzog and just pick his brain a little bit. I know he's a pretty like public person, so maybe one day, but
hmm
uh, I need to make the effort to find him.
yeah, that'd be
Um,
amazing.
but yeah, I have so much respect for him. He's very thoughtful in like the projects he takes on and the way that he approaches them. So yeah, what a guy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's all I had to say about the movie and everything. But thank you for being
Cool.
here.
Oh yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. And I'm always glad to talk with you about film.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it went
Yeah.
really well. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.